Hi students, so in this tutorial we will cover everything you need to know to start using Photoshop with confidence. I know that some of you, once you get in Photoshop, you're like, what do I do? How do I move things? How do I even begin to open a document? Well, you are in the right place. So let's begin. I'm going to make things easy for you. I have a link in the description that will take you to Adobe website where you can do a free trial, which is for a week, or you can go ahead and purchase the software. If you go under creativity and design, view, plans, and prices. Now you can see that Adobe gives you different options to choose from. So you can just buy the Photoshop or a bundle of the Lightroom and Photoshop. So instead of going for the one software, you can do the two for the price of one. When you open up Photoshop, there are a few things that you see. On the left hand side, you see new file, open, home, and a lot more. And then on your right hand side, where you see recent. Now these are files that I have used. So if you use it a new Photoshop, you will not have any recent files. Now, how do you get into Photoshop? So to get into Photoshop, you click on the PS icon and it will take you into Photoshop. Once you're in Photoshop, what you see on your screen is your workspace. You can see that on the left hand side, you have your tools bar, and then on your right hand side, you have your layers panel, which is on the lower section. And then at the top, you have other panels, which makes up the color swatch, gradient, and panels. And at the very top, you do have your menu bar, and then you also have your options bar. Now your options bar is activated based on what tool you have selected. Now there is one item that is missing from our workspace, which is the canvas on which we work. Open up a canvas. You need to go to File, and then you need to click on New. Now Photoshop opens up a new dialog box and it gives you some basic canvas templates that you can just choose from. So I'm going to choose the 10 by 10. Now when I choose the 10 by 10, I can choose to keep to the sizes that I've been given, or I can change my height to, let's say, a 6, keep my resolution at 300. Now typically your canvas comes in with a transparent background, but we want to keep it on white. So I'm going to click white so that once I hit create, you notice that my canvas now comes in with a white background. So now that you understand the interface of Photoshop, I want to go ahead and show you how to save a file. To bring in a file into Photoshop, there are two ways of doing that. You can basically drag and drop an image into Photoshop. Sometimes when you drag and drop an image into Photoshop, it will just show up. In other cases, it will open up this dialog box and all you have to do is click OK and it will show up in Photoshop. Now, the check mark you see on your screen is basically saying, do you want to accept this file? If you want to, you just double click on it. It will show up within your canvas. Now, there's another way that you can bring in a Photoshop file. You can right click on your file and you can say open with Photoshop, and Photoshop will open it in a completely different tab. Now, if you go under File, you will see that there are three options when it comes to saving a file. So you have Save, you have Save As, and Save a Copy. Now, this file, because I've brought in an additional layer into this document, the save is shown as highlighted, is not grayed out. Now, if I go to this tab and I go to File, you notice that the save is grayed out, but the Save As and Save a Copy are activated. Now, the reason why the save is not activated is because this file that we are looking at have not been edited yet. So once you edit it, it will allow you to save over that particular file. Let me demonstrate what I mean by that. So let's go back to this file. If I want to just save this document as is and maybe send it off to somebody, I can just go to File and I can choose Save As. Now, once you hit Save As, Photoshop brings up a dialog box and you can choose to save this on your computer or you can save it on the cloud. So we are going to choose Save on our computer. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to rename this file and save, and I'm going to name it as Portrait. Now, instead of saving it as a JPEG, which I can just send out, I want to keep working on this file. So I'm going to save it as a PSD. PSD basically means Photoshop document. Now, a Photoshop document is a file that you can keep editing, but a JPEG file, once you save it, it is not editable. You can basically send it off as an image to a friend on WhatsApp or even share it on your social media. So I hope this is clear. And also notice that when you click on Save As, your options are very limited. You can basically save the file as a Photoshop file or a PDF or a TIFF. I'm going to go ahead and click on Save. This dialog box will come up. All you have to do is click OK. Now, if I go back to my document, it has generated the portrait. So now that we have this file, let's say that I want to save this as a JPEG. So I'm going to click on my Move tool and I'm going to move this image to the corner and I'm going to scale it. Now, when you open up Photoshop at first, you might not have your auto selection or your show transform on. Now, if I uncheck these two, notice that even though I can move my image, I'm not able to select it and scale it. So to be able to move your image or your layer and still be able to scale it at the same time, you need to make sure your auto select is on as well as show transform. So I'm going to move this back to the location and I can just go ahead and scale it like this. I'm going to double click to accept and I'm going to go ahead to basically move this down so that it sets it in place. So now that I have this, let's say that I want to go ahead and save this as a JPEG. So I'm going to go to File and I'm going to go to Save a Copy. Now, when I drop down my format, you notice that I have my JPEG option and I can either save it as a portrait copy or I can save it as a JPEG. Now, all I have to do is click on Save. A dialog box will come up. Normally, the quality is around a 6 or an 8, but you want to make sure you take it all the way to 12 and click OK. Now, if I go back to my folder, you notice that I have this file right there. Now, this is a JPEG that you can share with your friends on social media. So with this set, the third way that you can save a file is using Save. So because I've made edits to this file, I can go ahead and hit Save. And once I hit Save, if I go back to my PSD file, so the thumbnail is giving me a preview of what my document contains. So let's say that I want to create a duplicate of this working file so that I can create another maybe artwork from this document. Go to File and click on Save As. Now we can change the portrait name and maybe make it portrait number 2 and the format should still say Photoshop. Click on Save and click OK. Now notice that the file name has changed for me. So now all the changes that I make on this document will only affect portrait file number 2, and the other portrait file will not be impacted. So I hope that this is not confusing. I want to take you through the different tools to just give you an idea as to how to use them. And also I will show you a few tips and tricks under the layers panel. So let's start with the move tool. Now I have already demonstrated, how to use the move tool. Is very basic, just as the name says. Move a file or basically scale it. So I'm going to scale this and set this in the middle. So let's say that I want to just crop half of our subject. So I'm going to go ahead and make a selection like this, and I'm just going to right click and say layer via copy. Now notice that in the layers panel there's a copy that has been generated for you. Now you can go back and use your move tool, and we are going to set that right there. So we have a copy like that. So that is how you use your Marquee tool. Now you can also use your Marquee tool in so many other ways. You can use the ellipse. So I can basically create just a circle around my subject from the top, and then I can basically move my shape in the location that I want. You always have to make sure you are on the right layer that you want to make a copy of. And I'm going to right click and say layer via copy. Now I'm going to turn off the visibility of the top layer, and I'm going to use my move tool, and I'm going to move the copy that I created. I'm going to scale it down, and I'm going to set it right there. The other thing I will show you about layers is that in your layers panel, you can move your layers up and down depending on what you want to be in the foreground and what you want to be in the background. I will demonstrate that as we go along. So the Poly Lasso tool and the Marquee tool works in a very similar way. As you can see, they both have the same options available to you, but the Marquee tool has a little bit more. Let's say that I want to basically make a copy. If I want to make like a copy of this section of the image, I can circle that area, make sure I'm on the right layer, right click, make a copy, and with my move tool, I can also move this and set it somewhere here, just like that. So it's very similar to the Marquee tool. I'm going to go ahead and delete this. Now, the next tool that we want to use is called the Quick Selection tool or the Object Selection tool. Now, I'm going to just demonstrate with the Quick Selection tool. So let's say I want to select this subject. So I can use the Quick Selection tool, and basically I can make a selection of my subject. And you can see that as I hover over, I'm basically making a selection of my subject. I can select her hair as well. Now, the other thing you see at the top is the option bar, which allows you to add to your selection, or you can subtract from your selection. So if I don't want to show the bottom, I can basically subtract this part from my subject. So now you can see that all I have is a selection of my subject. Now I can add a layer mask to basically hide my background. Now this is a very poor selection, so I'm going to show you another way that you can take off your background, which will give you a very clean look. So I'm going to press Command Z to go back and Command D to deselect. Now, if you go under your properties panel, you notice that once I have my background image selected, I can go under my properties. Typically, when you want to remove the background and you go under your property, you should be able to see a quick action, and then you click on the drop down. But in some cases, you need to first of all convert your layer into a smart object before you will see that quick action. So If I click on convert to layer, it will ask me, do you want to? I'm going to say yes, I want to convert it into a smart object. Now from there, you can click on remove background, and Photoshop will do its best to basically take off the background for you. Now you can see that it did a very good job to even cut out the hair. Now there's another tutorial that I will do which will give you an in-depth as to how well you can cut out or clean the hair. So with this set, I want to go ahead, make a copy of my background image. I'm going to press Command J to make a copy. Now, what I want to do is that I want to keep my first layer without a background. So you want to right click on your layer mask thumbnail. Now, your layer mask thumbnail is the black and white little thumbnail you see next to your image thumbnail. Now, once you right click, you want to click on apply layer mask. So basically it takes off the background for you. Now the other image we have, which is the original image with the layer mask, we want to take off the layer mask. So I'm going to go ahead and turn off my image without the background so I can show you what we need to do. If I right click on my layer mask, I can basically say delete layer mask, and you can see that my background reappears. Now I'm going to turn on my other image, so you can see that if I click on my move tool, you can basically see that I have two separate images. So I'm going to press Command D to go back. Now I'm going to skip a few of these tools to show you how to use the text tool, so that we can put our text behind our subject. So I'm going to pick up my type tool, and I'm going to click on my horizontal. I want to change my font color. So I'm going to click on my foreground and background. Right now you see that that is set to a red and a black. Now to set it to the default, you see a little black and white icon. Click on that, it will set it to the default. Now obviously I don't want a black color, so I'm going to click on my foreground color and I'm going to choose a different color. I'm going to click OK, and I'm going to type in the word bold, and I'm going to go ahead to select that, and I'm going to scale it just like that. Now notice that I used my scale or my move to basically scale my text, but you can also double click on it, go up to your options bar, and you can change your font thickness as to whatever you want. Now you can even change your font style as well right here. So I can change it to something like this, and I can basically go back and reduce my font size. Reduce it or make it a little bit more bigger. I can pick up my move tool and I can rescale it so it's much bigger like that. In your property panel, you can also increase or decrease your font size. You can also increase your spacing by clicking on the VA. We want to put our text behind our subject. So how do we do that? We are going to go into our layers panel, and we are going to move our text layer, and we're going to put it in between our cut out background and our original image. Now notice that you see the text right behind the subject. Isn't it cool? We are going to go ahead and move this out and set it somewhere here, just like that. Okay, so now that we have this, I want to go ahead and show you the next tool, which is your crop tool. Now with your crop tool, we can go ahead and crop our image just so that we don't have white outline, or even if we want to crop it a lot more, we can go ahead and even scale it down a little more and double click to accept. Now one thing that we can even do to this image is that we can add a shadow. So we can double click on our layer, it will bring up the layer style dialog box, and we can add a drop shadow. We can change the color of our drop shadow. So double click on your drop shadow. It will open up another dialog box, and you can basically click on the color and you can change the color to whatever you want, or you can even move your slider and choose whatever color you want. We're going to stick with the black. I'm going to go ahead to click OK. Now the other thing is you can change the angle of your shadow, and you can increase the distance, you can increase the spread as well, and you can increase the size of your shadow, as well as increase or decrease the opacity of your shadow. So guys, I'm gonna click OK. Enough of the detour. Now let's get back to our tools. I'm getting so excited. So with that said, we want to go ahead and use the eyedropper tool. Now the eyedropper tool is used to choose or pick any color of your choice within your document. So if I pick my eyedropper tool, right now my foreground color is set to a cyan. If I want to change it to red, I can use my eyedropper tool to basically choose the red in her dress, or I can choose the gray, or I can go back and choose the color of my text. So that is how you basically use your eyedropper tool. Now the next thing that we have is the patch tool. Now you can use the patch tool in so many ways, but I'm going to demonstrate. I'm going to show you the basic way to use the patch tool. So I'm going to click on my patch tool. Let's say that I want the same paint area to show a little bit above, to show in this area. Okay, so to do that, you want to make sure, first of all, you are on the right layer where you want to make the copy. And I'm going to move this, and I'm going to basically, so let's say that I want to show her face in this corner. Okay, so we can do something like that. So guys, the next tool that I want to show you is the brush tool. Now the brush tool is very easy to use. You can see that currently my brush size is very small. Now to increase it, there are two ways of increasing your brush size. You can use your left or right bracket to increase it, and if I want to reduce it, I can use my left bracket to reduce it. I can also go to my options tab and I can go under size. I can scale it up or I can scale it down. If I want to paint in this area, and let's say I want to choose a different color, I can go ahead and paint like that. Now notice that it did not give me, the edges are very blurred out. It didn't give me sort of a harsh edge. So let's say that we want to see a harsh edge. You have to go up to your options, and then under your hardness, you want to set it to 100. Now when I paint, let's say in this area, notice that it's giving me sharp edges. Now if you look at the thumbnail of our background, you notice that the paint that I applied it to the same background layer. So even if I want to just get rid of my paint, I will also have to get rid of my background. But there's another way to do it without destroying your background. You can press Command Z to go back. So if that happens and you decide to go back, you basically lose a lot of work that you have done. So what you should typically do is that you have to always create a new layer when you are applying any other element. So this way, if I choose not to use the painted area, I can just turn my visibility off. So this method is called the non-destructive way of using layers in Photoshop. First option I did was a destructive way. If I had to erase the painted area, I either had to go back and lose some work that I have done, or I have to delete the entire background. So guys, I hope that this was helpful. Now the next thing we want to talk about is the clone stamp tool. Now with the clone stamp tool, You want to make sure you're on the right layer. Let's say that I want to make a copy of my subject. So I'm going to hold down my options, and you see this little dot icon is telling you to make a selection of the area that you want to clone. Now you can see that it's already showing a clone of the person for me. Now I can go ahead and paint her in just like that. Just like that, you see that I have a clone of my subject. So our eraser tool acts just like our brush tool. It has similar settings at the top. Now, one other thing about the eraser tool is that apart from the options to increase the size and decrease it, you can also decrease the opacity or the flow of how much you want to erase. So let's say that I want to basically erase this little area of my subject. Notice that because I don't have the opacity at 100, when I do my first erase, it takes some portion of the image off, but is not completely erased. So I can keep pressing on the same area a couple of times until it completely erases it, or I can just increase my opacity to 100, and I can just, with one click, I can just erase that portion and it's gone. So guys, the next thing is your paint bucket. So under the paint bucket, we have another option, which is your gradient tool. So I'm going to demonstrate how you use both. So let's start with the paint bucket. Let's say that I want to add a background. So I'm going to go ahead and add a new layer, and I'm going to click on the plus icon, and I'm just going to click anywhere inside my canvas and click once, and it basically applies the background. Now let's say that we want to keep a bit of our original background as well as the yellow that we have. We can add a layer mask to our yellow and use our paint brush to basically hide some portion of our yellow background. Now to use the layer mask is used to either hide or reveal any element in your Photoshop. So when you go under your foreground, when you have a foreground which is black, black will hide anything you paint over and white will reveal. So with our thumbnail selected in our brush, with our foreground as black, we can go ahead and basically, I'm going to go ahead to change my brush hardness, and I'm going to set it to 0, and I'm just going to do something like this and paint in this area so that we sort of keep some of the yellow background, but at the same time keep our original background. Let's say I want to change the color. I can basically double click on my foreground color. I can go ahead and maybe choose a different color, pick up my paint bucket, and make sure you are on the right layer, paint that back in, and voila, we have something like this. Now, let's say that instead of creating one solid color, I want to create a gradient. So I can click on my layer, add a new layer, go back to my paint, and choose the gradient. Now at the top of your, now below your menu bar, you see that the option bar activates options for you to use when it comes to the gradient tool. Now there are so many different options to use, but when you do a drop down of your color, it gives you so many options that you can just click and use right away without you having to recreate any of the gradient yourself. So let's say that we want to choose this gradient color. So once you have it chosen, you will have to draw a line from one end of your canvas to the other to apply your gradient. So you can see that it gave us a very nice gradient option. Now, the other cool thing about using the gradient is that We can also go up to our gradient panel and we can choose any color from the top, or we can go and choose any color from the options that is provided at the very top. When it applied the gradient, it did not affect the original gradient that I created. It created a separate layer and it applied that gradient. So this is a good tip to note. It's a non-destructive way to apply a gradient through the gradient panel. This way, if I choose not to use this color, I can turn off the visibility and voila, it is gone. Well, it's hidden, not gone. Now, let's say that I want to keep my original yellow background, or let's say I want to keep this. So I can go back and add a layer mask and then pick up my brush tool and then also do the same brush effect so that I can have this cool gradient look. I actually like this. Now, if let's say I want to bump up my, I want my text to pop, all I need to do is double click on my text. It will bring up a layer style dialog box and I can add a background. I can add a drop shadow just like I did with the image. And I can go in and either decrease the size and I can decrease my angle and the spread of my angle as well. So I'm going to go ahead and click OK so that we can see what we have. We can go ahead and even move our text a little bit up. So guys, with all of this set, we want to go ahead and now look at the next tool, which is the dodge and burn tool. Now, think of it this way. The dodge tool is used to lighten any part of your image, and the burn tool is used to darken any part of your image. So let's pick the dodge tool and let's click on our image and let's apply. So look at what happens. See that it lightens up the right hand side of our subject. If I want to darken the opposite side, I have to go back and choose the burn tool, and you can also control the level of exposure that you apply to your subject or to whatever part of your design you want to darken. So notice that when I do this, it makes it dark. Now I have to repeat it again to get it even more darker. So that is basically how you can use your dodge and burn tool. I'm going to undo by pressing Command D so that I get to my original image because I like that. Now, the next tool I want to talk to you about is the pen tool. Now, the pen tool is used to give you precise selection. So let's say that I want to make a selection around her neck. So I can basically do this and then do something like that, and then do my next point, and then do my next point and my next point, and then just keep drawing around it just like that. And in some cases you want to basically make sure that you are going around your curve and you have it in the right way. So now that we have this selection, we can right click and say that create a vector mask. And notice what happened. It just cut out just that piece for us and everything else is hidden. This comes in handy when you want to basically cut out any element in a very precise way. So I'm going to deselect. We've already touched on the type tool. So I'm just going to move on and I'm going to show you how to use your shapes. Now you can basically select your ellipse and we can draw a circle just like this. And you notice that in your property bar, it gives you some options in your appearance. It shows you the size of your eclipse. You can change it to whatever size you want and it will transform it for you, or you can just use your shape, your move tool to just scale it. Now we can fill in the shape by clicking on any of this color, and we can also add a stroke by choosing any color of our choice. You have to increase the pixels so that you can basically see the size of your outline. So with this, you can also change your color. You can choose any color that you want in the options provided in the recent use colors, or you can choose any color within your working document and you can click OK. Now, what if we want to create a gradient color within our shape? So you can click on the gradient option right there, and you can choose whichever gradient color that you want. You can just play with it, or you can go under your options and you can choose whichever color you want. So guys, that is basically how you play around with your shape. Now I will do another tutorial where I go in depth on how to create different shapes, such as your squares, your triangles, as well as even creating polygons as well as stars. So stay tuned for that as well. Now, the next tool that we want to talk about is your magnifying glass, and that is the last tool that we are going to go over. Now, your magnifying glass, you notice that it's used as your zoom in and your zoom out. So if you want your document or your canvas size to fit the entire screen, you go and choose fit screen, and you notice that it filled up your screen for you. Now, let's say that we want to decrease, let's say we want to zoom in and out. So you can basically use your mouse to zoom in and out. You can use your zoom out to make it smaller, or you can use your zoom in to make it larger. So guys, this is basically how. So guys, I hope that going through all of these tools are going to help you to basically. So guys, if you made it this far, I want you to share your final art piece with me. So please share this with me on Instagram. You will see a link to my Instagram in the description below. If you're new to this channel, you're welcome. Please subscribe. Please give this video a thumbs up. Also, like and share this video. If you're new, please subscribe and also turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any other upload. I will see you in the next lesson. Bye, y'all.